1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey everyone, happy 2024. In case you didn't already recognize what I just played there, that was actually the great piano comping from Red Garland over what would be the first chorus of Miles Davis's solo on his classic recording of the tune If I Were a Bell. And I actually made a PDF of that example. It includes guitar tabs, notation, and all the harmonic labeling. If anyone wants to check it out, it's available on my website as well as my Patreon. The links are in the description. Now, although the title and thumbnail of this video here may seem a little clickbaity, I still feel as if the overall theme or message that I want to get across in this video is still pretty important, and this is really the video that I want to use to, at least for now, wrap up the huge topic I've been discussing, not only just on working on chordal material with a focus on the body component, but just the body component in general, and really practicing with a focus on a technical perspective of what you're doing. Now, first of all, before I say anything else, I just want to give a little disclaimer because, again, I know the thumbnail that I'm going to put up may seem a little clickbaity, but I don't want anyone to think that I'm insinuating or discouraging people away from learning any particular hip voicings that they may like, or that it's not a good idea if you haven't really discovered anything yet. Obviously, I would always encourage as much musical exploration as your passion may allow you to explore. It's just that, in my experience, I've encountered people, not just on the internet, guitar friends in my personal life, and even myself in the past, when people seem to focus on this type of thing a little too much, it tends to go along with a lack of an understanding of some of these other things that I want to point out in this video. I've had multiple guitar friends who have said to me at different times in my life things such as, like, I don't like the sound of this band because they sound too majory to me, almost insinuating that a basic major chord is just a lame sound in general, and therefore you can't get into the music, where having other people say things to me like, I don't like the sound of a basic dominant 7 chord. It sounds kind of corny to them, as if, it has no legitimate use and won't ever sound good in any context. Really, what I'm trying to get you to appreciate is how, when it comes to figuring out and learning about cool chordal ideas that you could play, it's not just always about individual voicings in an isolated fashion and, discovering cool sounds. And oftentimes, when you tend to level up, you'll realize that, what really leads you to good, sophisticated musical ideas is how these different voicings or whatever may be used in context and everything that goes along with that. And yes, obviously, there's always still going to be a component to this where we still have an appreciation for just individual chord voicings, for example, that may sound cool to us. For instance, the voicing that I ended that example with, which Red Garland himself doesn't actually play, but for like a F7 sharp 9, that's a cool voicing. I mean, I put the bass in there too, but that's unconventional. I like the way the notes are arranged. I can do it in the open position there as well, right? That's a cool voicing to me. But if you've been in this game long enough and you continue to have a thirst for musical knowledge, eventually, individual chords may not have necessarily as much of a novel effect on you as they may have once had, or at least in a sort of isolated manner, like I said before, completely void of any musical context. So first, if I talk a little bit about the example that I just played with Red Garland, obviously I translated it to the guitar, so it may be a little different, but it's generally all correct. But a lot of these voicings, they really may just be fragments of stock stuff that, once you've learned it, there's really nothing special about the voicings by themselves anymore. So maybe for like a G7, if the voicing is like this stock G9, maybe I'm just not playing the root, and I'm playing just the top notes. And then for a C13, same thing, I don't need to play the root. Like, that's a pretty basic one, you know. And then like a 2-5-1, like a G minor, you know, that's just the bottom 3 notes of this stock drop 2 voicing, third inversion of G minor 7. And then this is like a E diminished 7th, still coming out of a stock shape, and then, you know, major 9, 6, right? So a lot of these voicings, you know, they may be fragments of a more familiar thing, but you don't have to think about it as anything advanced. You're still working with what should be conventional sort of stuff that all guitar players or jazz guitar players will eventually learn. Another important component to this is obviously the rhythm, which sometimes I feel like I don't talk about enough with these types of ideas. And what he really does, almost as like a foundational rhythm for most of this, is he's basically playing like a syncopated 2 feel, where, you know, coming in on beats 1 and 3, but really the ands before. He doesn't start like that. He starts on the downbeat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, but here, it just continues. Right, that's like his foundational rhythm, and then he might leave space for variation, or then maybe come back in with like a downstroke. It could be really effective, you know, something like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Like when you're playing so many syncopated stuff, and then you variate it and you sort of punctuate with the downstroke and you're comping, it has a really nice effect to it musically. And another thing about this example is that if you check it out, it really does seem to be repeating a lot of the same chord voicings or shapes or even sequences of voicings in similar ways. They may be, you know, slight variations on each other, but that's why it's good to really get into the specifics and see how you can sort of manipulate these small little details of a, you know, stock idea and get, you know, specific results that are different variations, if that makes sense, right? That's why you really want to learn material with this and not just think like, oh, I know these basic chords, therefore I don't need to acquire a vocabulary of chordal ideas like I may do with linear ideas as well. Before moving forward, I'll show you one little part from this whole example. This is actually going into the next chorus where I ended it, but if you think of like a 2-5 in a key of F major, really he's thinking like G7 for the 2 chord, at least in bar 1, and he's coming in on the 8th note before the and of 4, so it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And that's just like I said before, the top of a G9, all right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Then it's like he basically leaves a whole note rest, comes in on what would be the second bar, right on beat 1 on the downbeat, like I said before, with a stock shell G minor 7 voicing. You can think of it going to C7 now, but if we were just on G7 for a 2 chord, you can start the C7 with now like cadencing first to a G minor 7, if that makes sense. Just so you have a little bit more motion with the voicings, because G7 is, or G minor 7 is now related to C7 diatonically. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And then Charleston rhythm, so it's like 1, 2. That's just, you could see this as A flat or G sharp diminished. In the key, I would see that more as like a F diminished symmetrically, which is like your tonic diminished. It's not like a 5 chord, but that's another diminished that can cadence to the 1. We've talked about this in a lot of videos. And then instead of just going right to the 1, which I'm playing like this, which is really just a D minor triad inverted, like second inversion. D minor is the relative minor of F major, but it's basically like a 1 chord. But I'm approaching it with a passing D flat minor triad. So the whole thing is like 1, 2, and 3, right? So the rhythm matters, the voicings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Kind of a cliche thing, but that's an idea, right? Everything I'm using there is stock stuff that we all may know and learn, but it's about how you're putting that stuff together specifically to give you a musical result, all right? If you're digging this video so far, it would really mean a lot to me if you gave it a like and consider becoming a subscriber as well as a contributor to Patreon, where you'll get all the PDFs on this channel for only $5 a month. And again, thank you so much for watching the video, and I hope you enjoy. So now I just want to quickly go through a few more musical examples and point out some other things that could be helpful to consider. So next I figured we could look at a piece of material from an actual jazz guitarist. This is something that I got from the great Ed Bickert, and it's coming out of a great duo album that he has with the trombone player Rob McConnell, and it's the second track on that album, which is entitled Mutual Street, and the song is called Wrap Your Troubles Up in Dreams. All right, so I'm basically working on the intro and then what he comps for the first chorus, or really during the melody following right after. All right, and I'm still working out the exactness of this one myself. There's no PDF. Some of the rhythms or whatever may be off from what he's doing exactly, but you'll still be able to get the general gist of what I'm showing you here. All right, so here it is. It's going to start with the intro. All this is really stock stuff. So it's definitely a little rusty, but you get the idea. Right now, Ed Bickert is a guitar player that, if you know him, I don't think anybody would argue against his undeniable greatness when it comes to his harmonic sensibility. And I'm by no means trying to reduce that entire greatness down to what we may just see in this one example, because it obviously extends far beyond the stuff that he does here. But if we do look at this example, it's like I said before, really most of the shapes that he seems to be working with here are stock stuff that if you've been playing for a while and you've learned these things, this is nothing that hip or uncommon, all right? And I want to remind you again with this stuff, like, we are really still focusing on the body component and just trying to work on bits of material, just like with the linear stuff. I was talking a lot about breaking up the material into individual fragments and working on them and exhausting those ideas, but it's still really good, obviously, to treat an entire piece of material like this just like an etude and be able to play it in its completion and make it sound good. And in my opinion, the reason why I think this is hard to realize sometimes for a lot of guitar players is because if you were to pick like any chunk of that and you were to look at what chords I might be using, like I said before, you might think a lot of those chords are kind of stuck, and things that you've learned before, you can play them well, and therefore you may think, I don't have to practice things like this because I see these ideas, they're pretty basic, I can just kind of pull them out of my ass if I wanted to in the moment, if I was just comping on a gig or at a jam session or something. But if you really haven't worked out these types of ideas, you may not really be able to pull it off as well as you might think, all right? That's why I think it's, hard to realize that, because any one of the little passages that I may have played there may not necessarily be too difficult in and of itself, but the bottom line is when you're really playing in the moment, like, are you going to be able to pick out ideas like that, and are they going to be able to connect, and do you know how to put voicings together and make them sound good? So I talk about this stuff all the time, but that's exactly why you study this stuff, so that you can actually see how to use it. You're working on it from a technical perspective so that you could play it, even if it's something that isn't actually that technically demanding, but you still need to be able to play it, basically like second nature, and it's into muscle memory. So I'm rambling now, so let's keep it moving. But this is why it's important, like I keep saying, to actually develop a vocabulary of chordal ideas for jazz as well, so that you can use them when you're comping and situations like that, all right? So next, we could look at one of my examples that I went through in a lot of episodes on this channel in the 70s when I was really going through this topic originally with chordal ideas. This was my Charlie Parker confirmation comping example, and maybe I'll include the link to the PDF for this example if you want to check it out as well. There's a lot of 2/5s in this example, and different kinds of 2/5s. They might actually be oftentimes in the same key of F major, but not always. But you could see in an example like this, different variations on the same 2/5 progression that give you different results. Now, I will point out, though, that it could still be helpful to categorize basic 2/5 progressions into a few simple categories. So first of all, whatever 2/5 you may have, if you look at the harmonic rhythm, it could be one measure each, like a measure of the 2, measure of the 5, or it could be a half a measure each, a half of the 2, half of the 5, then resolving to the 1. Or more uncommon, sometimes you might have a long 2-5, like 2 measures of the 2 or 2 measures of the 5. But all those different harmonic rhythm variations. But then amongst that, really, you only have a few. You might have a regular, like major 2-5, say I'm in F, G minor 7, C7, F major 7. I might have a minor 2-5 with like the G half diminished or minor 7 flat 5, C7, usually going to a minor. But that could resolve to a major as well. It's really just a different variation on the same basic sound. Of course, we can make the 2 a dominant, like a 2-7 as well, which we've seen already today. And that could resolve nicely to the 1 major or to the minor as well, okay? The 2-7, especially going to a minor, you can use like the tritone sub. That works good, right? But those are, different categories of basic 2-5s. But amongst those, you have different ways of expressing that with different specific voicings. Even if the voicings are basic voicings, you get different results. Again, I'm a broken record why you want to work on material. So if I go through this example, here's like a minor 2-5, right? Here's a major 2-5. Here's another one with a 2-7, right? So simple. It's coming syncopated on the 8th note before. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? But just knowing that you can play that G13 to the C7 sharp 9 and syncopating with the right rhythm, and that idea is going to work and connect. 1, 2, 3. Right? Moving along. Here's a little resolution to a minor. Same 2-5. Now this is cool. Right? That's like a 3-6 in the key, but it's like you're using a... That's a nice little device leading you to the 2. Right? Here's another one. Right? Stock shapes. Then for the bridge, here's a 2-5 with a measure each of the 2, coming from the diminished before. 1. Right? Here's another one. 2, 5. Here's another one. Right? And all those things that I'm playing there, the way I see it at least, are generally coming from stock shapes. There's nothing hip or innovative about them. It's simply that I'm putting them together in musical ways where the voice leading is good, the rhythm swings, and it becomes a piece of vocabulary, something that I know works if I'm hearing it in the moment and it seems to be the right thing to play. Alright? So, with all that said so far, there might be some of you who may possibly be thinking things such as, alright, Derek, well, all that's well and good. I don't think there's anything wrong with what you're saying, but when it comes to my style and taste, I'm maybe going for more of a modern type of sound, whatever that means, and none of the stuff that you're playing there really sounds that modern. It may sound like good, classic jazz guitar, but that's not the sound. Now, what means modern can mean different things to different people. I'm going to show you an example now. This isn't like the definitive end-all be-all of like modern jazz guitar comping, but it really just comes down to learning material that you like and just seeing what it is and starting with the material first and analyzing afterwards. So I could look at a clip like this, I'll probably put it up now, of Lage Lund comping behind Melissa Aldana on a blues in F. Really just, this is a short fragment where he's kind of playing on the 4 chord, going back to the 1, and then, to like the 2-5 part. So here it is. Alright, so this one is kind of hard to hear as well, but I can get some concepts out of it. A lot of it kind of sounds like he's playing around with like a sus structure, right? I think he's coming in on beat 4 of the first measure of the 4 chord. So we would have like 2 measures of B flat 7 in the F blues before going back to F. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Something like that, right? And he's basically moving that around. Sometimes he's, playing more strings in the shape or, adding them higher up than chromatically moving, but taking the high note out. Roughly speaking, I don't know if that's exact, but he's definitely inspiring these ideas in me either way. And I'm not going to go through the analysis in terms of like which voicings are hitting at which bars in the form and seeing how they relate to that harmony. But they do kind of work in an interesting way. And with that sus sound, you can always, like I said in other videos, like move them around. They move well in a parallel fashion before you resolve them. All right. And he's also doing it, I think, in like dotted quarter notes, starting on beat 4. It's like 1, 2, 3. Then he kind of goes to this on like the G minor 7, and this is really cool because this is another thing that kind of gives that sort of signature Lage sound that sounds modern and contemporary to me. But like, say you're looking at a G minor 7, that's literally just the flat third and the 9, but it's just a major 7 interval. So it's interesting to just express that sound of that interval to imply that sound. Like, that's all you need. You know, and I kind of took that a step further. You know, I think he goes to that, like for the 5, just a regular C7, but, you know, I kind of like that, and it kind of reminds me of his sound a lot. And it's kind of like a nice little counterpoint device that you could use for a 2-5-1. You can maybe extend it further, like a 3-6-2-5 you had. Right? How's that for modern sounding 2-5? And again, if you look at what's going on there, it's sort of like counterpuntual, whatever the word is, but none of those intervals individually, there's nothing hip about them in and of themselves. You know, what do you have? A major 7, a minor 6, and a perfect 4th, right? They're just intervals, but they work together in this musical way, and it's through studying musical examples or working them out that you basically can sort of find the gold of like actual musical ideas that sound good, right? So I definitely feel like I'm rambling a lot here today. I hope that my point is translating through accurately. All right, so I guess I will just leave this here for now. If anyone has any questions or anything they want to say, just put it in the comments. I'm here to help. And in the next episode,
hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey,
I'm planning on finally switching over main topics, and I want to start to really focus on the mind component of my approach for a while now. But I have a lot of other things going on in my life right now. Things might be in flux. I may need to, you know, change some things up here, or not necessarily take a break, but I'll definitely keep you guys updated with everything. I'm not going anywhere. All right, so if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like and consider becoming a subscriber as well as a contributor to Patreon as well, where you'll get all the PDFs on this channel for only $5 a month. And if you think anyone else would enjoy this content, please share it with them as well. And I'll see you guys in episode 93.
Swinging and playing the blues. That's what we about.
I'm trying to help you.